Welcome to this week's edition of Prep Zone Extra Points, sponsored by John Hoffer Jeep Chrysler. This week featuring Rick Peterson, Tim Bisel, and Brent Maycock.
And then there were four. Hey, high school sports fans. Welcome to a special edition of Extra Points. I'm Tim Bisel, the executive sports editor here at the Capital Journal, once again joined by our prep experts, Rick Peterson and Brent Maycock. We have moved Extra Points to Monday, largely because we'd like to both look back at some of Friday's action and look forward to some of this week's state semifinal and ending class of, class 8-man championship games. So, guys, just to start out with some thoughts from Friday night's action before we get into the details, get into the nitty-gritty here.
Well, it seems like the more things that change, more things stay the same. Hayden's back. Hayden's traditionally the city team that's the last one playing, and they're the last one playing again this year, coming back from a 1-4 start. Right. But I also want to point out that both Seaman and Washburn Rural really had good seasons this year and really took some steps forward. Washburn Rural lost a heartbreaker the other night, 17-14 on a late 40-yard field goal, and their defense must have just played lights out. Their offense struggled against good Free State defense, but they still got a long kickoff return and a long pick six to stay in the game and give themselves a chance to win. But that's our first two playoff game wins since 1992. And their best season since 1996, so that's a good sign for them. Seaman kind of got run-ruled by Aquinas, but that's not a huge surprise. Seaman just had trouble moving the ball, and they couldn't stop the pass. Aquinas completed 5 passes. Their starting quarterback completed 5 passes for 202 yards, so they were hurting them that way. But Seaman in Glenn O'Neill's first year goes 8-3, most wins since 2006. First time they've won 2 playoff games since 2005. So a great start for them, and I think after the game, Coach O'Neill was already talking about getting in the weight room and getting stronger physically and mentally, and I think they'll continue to take steps forward.
Since you started with them, we'll real briefly just kind of recap their final games of the season. You mentioned the final score at Free State 17, Washburn Rural 14. As you said, the Junior Blues did have their most successful season in about 2 decades, and you also mentioned their defense. Their defense was great, basically limiting Free State to 2 touchdowns and had an 80-yard interception return from Tyler Cummings. The offense just really couldn't get anything going.
No, I think Rural will get better offensively. They got 2 sophomore quarterbacks in Preston Williams and Jordan White, and Jordan White's kind of taken over here late in the year, and he's kind of a run-first type quarterback. And I wasn't at that game, so I don't know, but I'm sure they really keyed on him and kind of took that away and said, okay, we dare you to do something else type thing. But I don't think it gets talked about enough how much extra practice time and extra games can help you, particularly with young kids. Some of these young kids, they move up to the varsity after the JV and the freshman seasons are over, get some good practice time in, get some good game time in, and that just helps you build for I don't think Brent would agree. I don't think it's any big secret why these teams that are good year after year after year, one of them is because they're playing 12, 13 games a year, where the others are playing 8 or 9.
In some cases. And CJ said, when we talked about him breaking the all-time win total, he says, well, now that I'm getting 13, 14 games a year,
it's a little easier
to top into that thing. But yeah, the more you practice, and the more you practice against obviously good players, the more it helps these young kids to just kind of keep that growth going.
We'll get into. You saw an instant classic Friday night that we'll get into here in just a minute. A couple final words about Seaman. The Vikings wrap up Glenn O'Neill's first year with an 8-3 record. Pretty remarkable, coming off a 2-8 season a year ago. I believe it was 2-8 a year ago.
It was.
And you mentioned the run rule. Seaman had no defensive answers for Aquinas. Offensively, Dalton Callanan's a really fine senior season with 118 passing yards and a TD, and Nick Steiner had a nice game too, 84 receiving yards on 7 receptions.
Well, the thing I'm most impressed with Glenn O'Neill, and I've known him for years. I didn't work with him closely, of course, till this year, but he doesn't accept mediocrity. He doesn't accept average. I mean, when we talked right after he got the job and in preseason, hey, if you're not going out there to win every game, why go out there? And that's his attitude. And I think that's going to be his attitude with they lose a really good bunch of seniors. Cal, Nick Steiner, Kevin Morans, Mike Latondras, on and on. Their key players this year were seniors. But I think that's going to be his message to, hey, we did this last year. We expect to do that this year.
Yeah, I think he did that at Scott City. I mean, they had some great teams and lost some great senior classes. But he holds the expectation that, hey, it's not just because of this senior class. It's because we have a program. And he expects it every single year. And that's why you saw him win state basketball championships with a Ron Baker, without a Ron Baker, state football championships. I mean, they're always, when he was at Scott City, they were always a player in football and basketball, and that's where he expects him in football to be.
And I think he's proven that in year 1 at Seaman, no doubt. Wrapping up those games, Aquinas will now move on to play Mill Valley, a 7-4 team, on Friday in the 5A semifinals, and Free State moves on. Free State improves to 9-2. Free State will play undefeated Derby on Friday. Well, that brings us to the good stuff as far as our local teams are concerned. We have 2 local teams in Class 4A Division II moving on, and both will play. They'll play each other in a rematch of a game earlier this year. Hayden will be at Holton once again. The Wildcats advance with a pretty convincing 40-12 win against Girard. Game really was never in doubt. The Wildcats led 33-0 at halftime. Thomas Stringer, we've talked about Thomas throughout these shows this season. He has another fine game with 106 rushing yards and 2 TDs on only 12 carries. Samson Houston accounted for a pair of first-half scores, one on a 38-yard run, the other on a 33-yard pass to Scott Wilson. Wildcats, as you mentioned at the start of this show, they're back where they usually are.
Well, I remember when they were 1-4, and Coach Arnold said, "Hey, we're okay. I mean, we're going to get it turned around. We're not going to say gloom and doom." And sure enough, here they are. This is their 3rd straight year in the state semifinals in 2 different classes. They've been played at least 12, back to what we were talking about, the extra practice time and all extra game time. They've played at least 12 games, 4 straight years. So again, they're where they expect to be. And they're not real explosive this year, but quietly they've put together some good numbers. I mean, Stringer's now to 911 rushing yards, and then they got Andrew Smith with right at 600, and Connor Hobart with over 500. Samson Houston in his first year as starting quarterback missed some time with an injury. He's now thrown for 682 yards and 6 TDs. They got a really good receiver in Deshaun Hanukkah, who's caught 33 passes for 400 yards and 4 TDs. And I mentioned the passing game because I think that's where, when you're playing a team for the second time in, 4 weeks?
Yep.
They know what you did the first time. And I think to be able to beat Holton a second time on their home field, I think Hayden's going to have to throw some different wrinkles at them. And I think the passing game would be very important to them. From Holton's standpoint, I think Holton feels like, and I hate this cliche, but they just got to play Holton football. In the second half of the first time, they did not play Holton football. As Brooks Barta said after that game, he couldn't remember a time, where they had turned the ball over and self-destructed in the second half like they did. So they just got to do what they do, but better than they did the first time.
Well, Brent, that kind of brings us to your game. 3 quarters into Friday night's action, I'm guessing you would have thought you'd be anywhere but back at Holton this week.
It looked like Frontenac was going to just completely blow Holton away on their home field. They're up 21-0. They're doing virtually nothing wrong, kind of unstoppable. Holton couldn't get anything going, and it was just, as soon as that 4th quarter started, it just flipped. Holton finally broke a big play, got a 44-yard touchdown run from Spencer Baum.
Yep.
And this is a Holton team that when things go good, they ride that momentum like nobody's business, and they squib the ensuing kick. Not necessarily an onside type of deal, just kind of a squib out there. Frontenac couldn't come up with it. Holton does. They score a couple plays later. Boom! Now, and the big thing is they're getting 2-point conversions with their touchdowns. So now they're within a touchdown, and then on the very next play, Frontenac fumbles, and that's their sixth turnover all year that they had. And Holton gets on that fumble, score a few plays later, and boom, just like that, they're up 24-21. And in a matter of 2 minutes and 26 seconds, they've got 3 touchdowns after going 3 quarters with not even close to a touchdown. Nothing to show for it. Frontenac responds, comes back down, gets a touchdown to go ahead. Holton has the ball with 6 minutes left at their own 14-yard line, puts together a 21-play, 6-minute drive, scores with 13 seconds left for the win. It was
Tyler Price,
yes,
1-yard plunge.
1 yard, and it wasn't questionable. Did he get in? Did he not? He got in. It was pretty clear, and it was just one of those deals. It's kind of amazing to watch a team kind of be in a position where they kind of have to hurry up, but still have the patience to just run their offense, get the 4 or 5 yards per carry, and just keep at it, and go all the way down, and not worry about, hey, that clock's ticking closer towards 0. And both coaches after the game, just you could just tell, yeah, they really couldn't explain what happened. I took Coach Smith from Frontenac, the son of legendary Coach Chuck Smith. I'm at a loss for words. I mean, he just didn't know what to say. It was a game they had complete control of, and it just went away. And Brooks, after the game, did we just win that?
Absolutely.
Did we really just win that? I mean, and that was the sentiment, because it was almost, in the third quarter, it was almost like the Holton faithful had resigned themselves that they were going to get beat. The announcer, I remember at one point, was commenting and said, and that's good for a Holton first down, when then actually just turned the ball over on down. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry. And everybody in the Holton crowd kind of, ha, 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 laughed at it like, well, that's kind of how our night's gone, And then all of a sudden, game just had a 180 flip. And, the first time Hayden and Holton played, that game had a complete 180 flip in it as well, because Holton completely dominated the first half of that game. They fumbled the opening kickoff. Hayden got a quick touchdown to go up. And then Holton came back, and they could not be stopped in that first half. They did whatever they wanted to against the Hayden defense. And then in the third quarter, Holton fumbles their first 2 offensive plays. Hayden turns both into touchdowns. And then on their fourth possession, Jay Kite gets a strip 6, goes the other way, returns a fumble 50 yards for a touchdown. And just like that game went from Holton being up 2 touchdowns to Hayden being in control and Holton scrambling for its life. And they came back and got a touchdown late in the game, but Hayden just completely flipped that game. So Holton's been on both sides of these flips this year. One bad for him, one good for him. I think it sets up a tremendous rematch up there this Friday.
Let's talk a little bit more about the rematch. Pistol's already talked a little bit about the difficulty that Hayden might have trying to beat a really good Holton team for the second straight time. What do you guys expect to see from this game?
I expect there to be a lot of offense. Actually, I think the first one was the first 2 times. So. I think that both teams just have offenses that the other team just has a tough time stopping. Hayden's got some great linebackers. Brent, AJ Shaw have been really, really good this year. But Holton's, one of their best things is getting to that point of attack and getting bodies on body and just finding that seam and just staying consistent with what they do. They may get stopped for short gain, and all of a sudden, boom, they'll break one. And it's their misdirection within their bone that makes them tough. And Hayden, kind of the same way. Connor Hobart had a couple really nice runs on a little misdirection stuff that really gouged Holton the first time they play. And I think Rick said, the passing game will be key. That Holton had a hard time handling when they got it out to Deshaun Hanika, covering him one-on-one. So I think it's going to be a very entertaining game. Who knows? It'll probably be a defensive struggle this time. Now that both teams have played the offensive part of it. But I think it's going to be a fun game.
I think it's going to come down to who, as I said earlier, who can come up with the most things different, the different wrinkles, because they obviously know a lot about each other. And I just think, and I know, for Brooks Barta, that means maybe some different kind of plays, different kind of wrinkles out of the running game. Probably, I don't think he's going to come out and throw the ball 30 times. But
I want to see that. Actually.
Yeah.
There's no that's no wrinkle.
yeah. But Coach Arnold is a bit of a gambler, I think. And I think I wouldn't be surprised to see some things that we haven't seen all year out of their playbook.
Yeah, and turnovers will obviously be the huge thing. That was the key in the first time Holton and Hayden met. It was the key in the game the other night when Holton beat Frontenac. You have the muff kickoff and a fumble from Frontenac that leads to 16 points for Holton and really kind of got that momentum just steamrolling in their favor.
You mentioned Baum's 44-yard run, which kind of sparked the comeback the other night. He finished with 181 rushing yards on 27 attempts.
And I think he had 16 at halftime. So he did the bulk of his damage in the second half.
Is he a guy that you expect the Wildcats to kind of ride?
Yeah, at the start of the season, it was Baum and Miles McClintock-Strozier that kind of share the duties. Both are over 1,000 yards this year. But McClintock-Strozier got a little bit of case of the fumbleitis, and so he became a little bit more limited in Holton's offense the past few weeks. Now, he ended up with about 17 carries the other night, so kind of working back in. And, ball security. I mean, he was one of the guys that had a fumble in the first game. Baum, I believe, had a fumble. Was the one that got stripped. So I think the Tyler Price has really become a bigger part of their offense out of the fullback. And when they get their fullback going in that offense, that's real key because you get the fullback going, then you got to worry about that first because he's the first guy. He's the first option on every snap, and he's become a really big part of their offense.
Well, as you guys both have kind of alluded to, the one thing we always know about Holton, they're not going to pass. They're going to run the football. They ran the football the other night, and despite the rough first three quarters, they finished with 341 yards on the ground, and I'm sure we can expect more of that on Friday. So
Absolutely.
That ought to be a dandy. We'll move on real briefly to Class 3A, where Roswell continues its bid for a three-peat. Bulldogs look awfully impressive in a 67-31 win over Caney Valley. Rossville scores 54 points during the opening half. That's not a bad first half.
Not too bad.
Improving to 11-1, and I had to do a double take when I looked at the stats. Jacob Bradshaw was absolutely unreal again, running for 369 yards, which is impressive by itself.
Yeah.
And then you look and see that he had all of 10 carries to do the 369 yards worth of damage.
And all in the first half.
Unbelievable game. He finishes with 3 TDs as well. Rossville gains 568 yards on the ground. They're rolling right now.
They're rolling. They're healthy again too. And when Dawson Thomas is healthy for that team, they're a completely different football team. He missed some time early in the year, and that kind of led to some of their struggles. He's a tremendous defensive player, but importantly, he's a guy on offense that you have to account for. Rossville's offense is going to be quarterback centric. That's just how Derek Thomas runs things and puts everything on his quarterback to kind of do things. But having Thomas as a threat in the backfield, he was a 1,000-yard rusher last year, really didn't get to carry the ball for much of the first half of the season. Having him back there just makes Bradshaw even more dangerous because you have to account for Dawson Thomas in the backfield now. And they're rolling right now. I mean, they're playing with the confidence. Of course, this is their time of year as of late. They're in the state semifinals for the 5th straight year. They've won 2 straight state titles. And, they're a team riding this wave of confidence. And like Pistol said, the extra practice, all these guys that weren't starters last year, they played against some pretty good guys the last couple of years. They got them ready for this point, and here they are.
Pistol, the Bulldogs will go on to play an undefeated Nemaha Central team. So in spite of how good they looked the other day, they've still got plenty of challenges ahead.
Well, and I haven't talked to Coach Warrensville lately, but there's a guy that's proven he can do it. He took a Topeka West team with 30-some players to the 5A championship game and played a good Salina Central team. Very tough in that game, but when he's got the players, Warren Sites can deliver, and I think that's what they've proved. And they've been building to this point. I mean, they've had some good years since he's been up there, and
they've already beaten Silver Lake, which is the only team to have beaten Rossville this year. So.
Well, and I think that's the case too. I think you gain more confidence, and it's not only Silver Lake. I mean, they played Sabetha.
They beat Sabetha.
Which is a good team. So I think it's good, but I mean, first off, they got to be able to stop Roswell.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, my goodness, I know I've talked a lot about Bradshaw already, but we came into the season kind of wondering what the post-Horak era would look like. He's answered that question.
Yeah, and when I talked to people in Roswell, they said, hey, we got a guy that's pretty good that's going to step in there, and he would have been starting last year if Horak wasn't the guy. And replacing a guy like Horak was tough, and his numbers are going to end up being in the vicinity of what Tucker did a year ago, which his numbers were out of this world last year. But he's a different player than Horak, I think. But he's a pretty good alternate for him. This Nemaha Central team last year, I would guarantee that, no, not guarantee, I would go out on a limb and say that Coach Thomas would say that Nemaha might have been the best team they played up until the state championship game last year. They were both undefeated, met in the second round of the playoffs last year, and Nemaha hung with Roswell for a half, and then Tucker took over and made some of the greatest individual plays I've ever seen a player make in a game. And so I know Derek is very leery of it, and Derek's a Nemaha kid. He grew up in Nemaha Valley, so he's got some ties back there. So I know he's got his pulse on what's going on at Nemaha Central. I expect this to be a great game. Nemaha's a great team. They got a great quarterback in Ryan Hazenkamp. They've really filled the holes that they lost from last year on their line really well, and it should be a really fun game.
Well, and I think Derek Thomas has proved, without a doubt, that the dude can coach. Yeah. I mean, I thought he did a great job at Washburn Rural. He was a very, very good assistant coach for Tom Stringer at Hayden. I thought he did a great job as head coach at Washburn Rural. And I think he's just parlayed that and just continued probably to grow as a coach and had some darn good players. And, but he's going to go down as one of the more successful coaches in this area, which is pretty good for him. And I think he started Rural on that upward path that they've continued now under Coach Butler.
Yeah, I think both schools are happy with who they've got. They basically switched coaches, and I think Rural's happy to have Steve Bueller, and I guarantee you Rossville's happy to have Honest.
Yeah, I think both schools would have the same, pretty similar success if Bueller was back at Rossville and Hamas was back at Rural. I think you'd be seeing a lot of the similar stuff. I mean, I just think both coaches are great coaches that just, for some reason, it was time for them and where they were at to part ways, and sometimes change works out better for the both. So I think both are tremendous coaches.
Well, we've gone on pretty long here, but real briefly, I wanted to just touch on the 8-man championships this week, particularly the Division II matchup between two unbeatens, Hanover, which is in our circulation area, and Dighton, which is 12-0.
Yeah, Hanover, this is their third straight year in the championship game. Last 2 years, they were in Division I and lost in both those title games, one to Central Plains, one to Spearville. Now they're back down in Division II, where they won state titles in 2008 and 2009. And this year's team, just defensively, and you don't say that much in 8-man football. Usually it's offense, video game type numbers. Their defense has taken some of the best offenses in the state this year and just held them to nothing. They took a Hutch Central Christian team 2 weeks ago that had scored 108 the week before, held them to 6. They took a Pike Valley team that was averaging 50-some points per game, shut them out last week, and the game was over, at halftime or early third quarter. So their defense this year is just tremendous, they've still got offense if they need it. And Will Bruna, who all he did last year was set 8-man state passing records for yards, touchdowns, and completions in a single season. So if they have to go to a shootout, I think they can. But their defense has been just tremendous. Now Dighton will test them a little bit. They got a really nice passing game with Tyler Ling and Dalton Foos, but Dylan Foos, but I just think Hanover's defense this year is kind of on another level.
You got a prediction for that one?
I'll pick Hanover
6-3.
I don't think it'll be 6-3. I think they have a shot at Mercy Rule and Dighton. I just think that their defense has been just so good this year that I can't imagine a team that can beat them. I mean, now Dighton passes pretty well, but I just think Hanover's defense is on another level. I think the Division I game will be a great one too. Osborne undefeated, St. Francis undefeated. So all 4 teams in the 8-man championship games undefeated this year. St. Francis versus Osborne should be a great game. I will take in that one, I'm going to go with Osborne. But St. Francis just knocked off the defending champion. So
Well, since we're doing predictions, I'll put you guys both on the spot because we got two dandy games, and you guys will be at you'll be at Hayden Holton Pistol, and Brent, you'll be at the Roswell Nemaha Central game. You guys, are you up for predictions on those two?
I'll let Brent do it.
I'm always up for putting my neck on the line and having somebody hate me and somebody like me. But I think in the Holton Hayden game, I think in my predictions before the playoffs started, I picked Holton to win the 4A Division II championship. So I'm going to stick with that. No sense in changing now. If you can pull that game out of the fire, I think you can do a lot of things. I think it's going to be a great game though, and it won't shock me if Hayden wins it all. And then Roswell Nemaha, I think Roswell's experience just being in this position, it's been more than 2 decades since Nemaha's been this far in the playoffs. I'm going to go with the team that's been there. I'm going to go with Roswell.
Pistol, I won't put you on the spot too much, but I do, if I recall correctly, I do think your pick in 4A Division II differed from Brent's. I think you had the other team in this matchup. Am I correct there?
You are.
Okay.
I think yours was Holcomb over Hayden in the title game,
Okay.
which could still happen. Holcomb won last week, knocked out the other team that I had. I had Collegiate on the other side.
The one thing I do guarantee Friday night is the Wildcats will win.
That's right. Very good. That's a heck of a pick there.
Yeah.
I like it. Well, on that note, we'll call it good, folks. That'll do it for this special edition of Extra Points. We hope you've enjoyed it. Be sure to visit Prep Zone and CJ Online for the best high school coverage in Kansas. Thanks a bunch.